Hey, Fresno, what time is it?
It's time to stir it up!
Welcome to Stir It Up, a weekly program produced by a collective of local activist organizations in Fresno. Please join us as we educate, agitate, and pontificate.
And good afternoon to you on this fourth Wednesday of the month, which is time for WILPF Stir It Up. My name is Jean Hayes, representing that wonderful peace organization headed by women. WILPF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, is the oldest women's peace organization in the world, being founded in 1915 by Jane Addams and about 1,300 women who got together in The Hague to try to stop the cause of war and to try to stop World War I. For that reason, they were considered by our government to be dangerous women, and we proudly affiliate with that characterization, even now. We work for peace, justice, dignity, disarmament, care of the earth, and human rights for all, having sections all over the world. Our local Fresno group of WILPF meets on the second Thursday of each month at, usually at the Fresno Center for Nonviolence, but we're meeting virtually on Zoom right now. So find us on Facebook and find out how you can join in to our WILPF meeting. What we do is quite varied. We have advancing human rights. We have Cuba and the Bolivarian Alliance section. We have a newly formed Unpacking Racism section, Earth Democracy, Legislative Committee, the Middle East, and, of course, Disarm, End Wars. And to that subject, our program is devoted today because we have a guest with us that can tell us all about that. I am so extremely impressed and honored to have Alice Slater, a WILPFer from New York, with us to talk about the ratification just finished of the United States Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Let me tell you, hi, Alice, how are you?
Hi, I'm so delighted to be here.
I am so delighted to have you. Let me tell you, the listening audience, a little bit about Alice. Alice serves on the board of directors of World Beyond War and is the UN NGO representative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. She's on the board of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, the Global Council for the Abolition 2000, and the advisory board of the Nuclear Ban U.S., supporting the mission of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, otherwise known as ICAN. And you might know that ICAN won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 for its work in realizing the successful UN negotiations for this treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Alice began her long quest for peace on Earth as a suburban housewife when she organized Eugene McCarthy's presidential challenge to Johnson's illegal war in Vietnam. And she has been working ever since for peace. As a member of the Lawyers Alliance for Nuclear Arms Control, she traveled to China and Russia on numerous delegations engaged in the arms race and banning the bomb. She's a member of the NYC Bar Association and serves as the coordinating committee of the People Climate Committee, New York City, working for 100% green energy by 2030. She's written numerous articles and op-eds with frequent appearances on local and national media. So, Alice, we are so fortunate to have you here, especially in this exciting time when I believe it was Honduras was the final nation to giving the 50th status to the treaty for ratification for nuclear weapons. Tell us about your work and talk about the implications of this major accomplishment.
Well, this is so fabulous because actually we finally banned the bomb. We never had a treaty until now that said nuclear weapons are illegal, you can't have them, you can't use them, you can't threaten to use them, you can't share them. We had this 1970 treaty, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, where 5 countries, the U.S., Russia, China, England, and France, promised to make good faith efforts for nuclear disarmament if all the rest of the world promised not to get them. And everybody signed this treaty in 1970 except for India, Pakistan, and Israel, and they went and got their own bomb. And the treaty had this horrible Faustian bargain where if you promise not to get nuclear weapons, we'll give you the keys to the bomb factory, because we gave everybody an inalienable right to peaceful nuclear energy. I mean, just think about inalienable right. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and peaceful nuclear energy. Where did that come in? So North Korea, they got their peaceful nuclear energy, and they walked out and made a bomb. And that's where we were. And instead of making the good faith efforts that they promised, they kept the 5 nuclear weapon states plus the others that didn't sign. There's now 9. They were all making new weapons and modernizing them and, threatening each other and we're doing nuclear war games right now on Russia's borders with NATO. So the ban treaty came along because they saw that these promises weren't being kept. And we've already banned chemical and biological weapons, but that treaty never said they're forbidden. It just said we're going to, they can have them, but they're going to try to get rid of them. And they never did. They acted in bad faith. So this started about 10 years ago, and we got a tremendous push. The NPT was being reviewed every 5 years, the old treaty, and at the last one they couldn't accomplish anything. They didn't make any new promises, and South Africa made this speech that we're living under nuclear apartheid, where the nuclear haves are threatening the whole world, the nuclear have-nots. And it took off. The Red Cross gave a statement that about international humanitarian catastrophic consequences, because we forgot the damage that the bomb could do. We were talking about security and deterrence, and people forgot how destructive nuclear weapons could be. And so this reminded everybody, and we had this fabulous 10-year campaign, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. And we wound up with a UN vote to negotiate the treaty, and then they negotiated the treaty, and which prohibited and banned the bomb, and 122 countries voted for it. And it was boycotted by all the nuclear weapon states, boycotted it, and our NATO allies and Pacific allies in the U.S. nuclear umbrella. So it's NATO plus, in the Pacific, we got Japan, of all places, South Korea, and Australia, part of the U.S. nuclear umbrella. So those countries boycotted. Now, after they signed and voted on it, the rules of treaties the rule of this treaty was that it wouldn't go into effect and be law until 50 nations ratified it. It's not enough just to sign it. Like in the United States, a president signs a treaty, but the Congress has to vote by 2/3 in the favor for it to be ratified. So we had this long campaign since the treaty was negotiated in 2017, and this week on United Nations 75th anniversary day, the 50th country signed, which means that in 90 days, which will take us up to January 21st of this year, it will go into effect. It will be law and binding on the countries that sign. Now, 50 ratified, over 84 already have signed it, and they're all going to keep ratifying. And then people say, yeah, but what are you going to do? The U.S. didn't sign, Russia. The fact is, we never signed the landmines treaty, but it became taboo. It got stigmatized, and the U.S. stopped manufacturing landmines if we don't use them. So it's going to create an international norm that these are now illegal, prohibited. You can't make them. You can't threaten to use them. That's the deterrence policy we have, that we can threaten to use them. And, we got help in this treaty negotiation from Pope Francis. They always supported deterrence. And then he said, no, you can't even threaten. You can't have them. They should be banned. And the Vatican, which has a vote at the UN, they voted in favor of the treaty. So this was, terrific. And we had a wonderful, spontaneous virtual call this weekend when the 50th country ratified, Honduras, and we were brainstorming, what do we do? Well, we said on the 90th day, people were saying, well, maybe we can light up the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building, and because there were 100 people on this virtual call from every corner of the universe. I mean, we had people from Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean that were helping us. Wasn't the usual suspects. They were out of it, the NATO states and our allies. It was everybody else who was part of this. So that's where we are. We're brainstorming about how we're going to celebrate and promote it. And in the NATO countries, 5 NATO countries have U.S. nuclear weapons in their country, on their bases: Germany, Italy, Holland, Belgium, and Turkey. And in those countries, there are tremendous demonstrations at the bases now that the treaty's passed. Their parliaments are passing resolutions calling on their government to leave the U.S. nuclear umbrella and sign the ban treaty. So that's going to have an effect back in our country. We're going to hear about all these countries leaving our nuclear alliance because their people are pressuring. There's tremendous grassroots pressure, and it's really a wonderful blow to the military, industrial, academic, media, congressional complex,
Yeah.
It was really interesting. The week before the 50th, the U.S. was going around telling governments to unsign the treaty because they were nervous that it would go into effect. They were literally trying to pressure countries not to sign it.
So does this mean that the nuclear weapons that we have now in other countries, we have to dismantle?
Well, it's not legally binding on the countries that didn't sign it. But it's now become an international law that's going to have effect. So right now, there are about 14,000 nuclear weapons on the planet, and 13,000 of them are in the U.S. and Russia.
Oh.
So the other 7 countries, which is England, France, China, Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea, between them have 1,000. So it's really up to us and Russia. And it's going to be, Russia's always been willing. Gorbachev wanted to get rid of all the nuclear weapons when the wall came down, and Reagan said, great idea. And Gorbachev said, well, don't do Star Wars. And Reagan said, I can't not do Star Wars. We had this military doctrine, which we still have, to dominate and control the military use of space. So Reagan pulled it off the table. Then Clinton, and also Reagan promised Gorbachev. They were very nervous about when the war came down and Gorbachev let go of all of Eastern Europe without a shot. I mean, it was like a miracle. That was the end of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War and the whole Eastern phalanx of Soviet troops there in Eastern Europe. And he said to Reagan, when the war came down in Germany, don't let a unified Germany go into NATO, because Russia lost 27 million people to the Nazi onslaught. Does anybody know this? I didn't know it. I found out when I went there the first time. I used to think the communists were terrible. I grew up with McCarthy. I was afraid to talk to a communist. They lost 27 million people during World War II. And so he was afraid of Germany, being on the rise. And Reagan said, don't worry, let Germany reunite and come into NATO, and we promise you we will not expand NATO 1 inch to the east. And now it's right up to their border, NATO, We're doing war games on their border with nuclear weapons war games. And they're always asking us for disarmament. You know, we're walking out of all the treaties. We walked out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. Putin offered Clinton when we were about to put missiles in Romania, like, let's cut our weapons to 1,000 each and call everybody at the table for abolition. But don't put missiles in Romania. And Clinton said, I can't promise that. And then Bush walked out of this anti-ballistic missile treaty. It's not just Trump. I mean, it's all of them. You know, and when Obama made this little deal with Medvedev where they got rid of another 1,500 nukes, we had started at 70,000, so we're down to 14,000. You know, at the height of the Cold War, there were 70,000 bombs on, so we know how to get rid of them. We know how to inspect them. We know how to work with the Russians and make sure they're not cheating and we're not cheating. We know how to do all this. So... This new treaty has changed the conversation. It's not about deterrence and strategy and security. It's about nuclear annihilation and catastrophic consequences, and it's illegal and it's banned, and it's going to impact our country as other countries start picking up on it. You know, particularly the NATO alliance and Japan. I mean, for goodness sakes. Japan's in our nuclear alliance. They were the ones that had 2 bombs dropped on them, you know.
Wow. It seems almost too good to be true that this has happened, but what a welcome it is in this time of so much badness.
I know. It's like, you know what it is? It's like we're, in a way, I heard Michael Moore say that this terrible pandemic is Mother Nature is telling us to go to our room for a time out, you know, and I'm saying, and stop fighting and play nicely with each other. And when it started last March, you know, the air was cleaning up, the smog was going in L.A., they could drink the water, the Ganges, they were seeing the fish in the Venetian Canal, you know, there were like certain, you know, 40,000 people didn't die in car crashes because, you know, nobody was going anywhere. I don't know. It's just like we blew it because of this stupid, you know, Caligula. I was reading in Greek mythology that they had plagues when they had a bad emperor. So this is what we're living through right now. We got to get rid of him. You know. Then we got to really stay on Biden's back because see, they're no better. They're no better.
Yes.
On foreign policy, you know, I mean, the Democrats are great on abortion and gay rights and civil rights and freedom, but when it comes to military-industrial complex, they're all in bed all together. As a matter of fact, Trump, the broken clock that could be right twice a day, came in saying, I'm going to make a deal with Russia, I'm going to make a deal with North Korea, I'm going to win the Nobel, you know, bullshit, he's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And he offered North Korea when he went through those negotiations. And by the way, South Korea elected a new president at that time. It was as if we had elected Dennis Kucinich in America. The South Korean president was a total peace president, so he was supporting all these negotiations and the Olympics. So Trump promised North Korea that we pull 10,000 troops out of North Korea, and the Democrats voted against it in Congress. So he pulled out, you know, I mean, he was trying to, for whatever reason, I'm not giving him credit. I'm just saying he's been good on this. He doesn't like NATO, you know, he doesn't like, he's pulling troops out of places, and the Democrats and the regular Republicans, everybody's going nuts that he's trying to, you know, hurt our defensive posture. I'm not saying he's doing it for a good reason, but for whatever reason he's doing it, it's not bad, you know. And they're voting against him.
Yeah, I'd like to stop for just a minute and remind people who just now tuned in who they're listening to and what we're talking about. This is the Stir It Up program sponsored by the Fresno branch of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. We're concentrating now on the ratification of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that has just reached 50 ratifications necessary for it to go into force. And we're talking to a fantastic expert about that, WILPF, Alice Slater, who's head of, she's been on just about every nuclear commission there is, including World Beyond War, and she's telling us the implications of this ratification. And so, Alice, again, thank you for being on the show. And I know one of the things concerning everybody is, could this be starting a new Cold War between the United States and Russia? And if so, how can that be avoided? Can you talk about that?
Not at all. I mean, we started a new Cold War, but, that was Hillary was doing that. I mean, Hillary compared Putin to Hitler after they lost 27 million Russians to the Nazi onslaught. And then it was Obama and Hillary that were talking about the China pivot. Mm-hmm. We have to be very clear about this. So, and I mean, I've been quoting Putin's speeches lately. He said we begged America not to walk out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. Bush walked out of that. We had a treaty where we weren't going to build anti-missiles, so we didn't have to keep building missiles. Bush walked out of it. Clinton started to do that. Clinton started to expand NATO, which we promised Gorbachev we never would do, and he bombed Kosovo against the UN security, the veto, Russia's veto, which we had a treaty with the UN that we would never do a war of aggression without, only the UN could do that unless we were under imminent threat of attack. And Kosovo was under no intention to attack us. We just didn't want the Russian people to get influence in that area of the world, and so we went and killed a whole bunch of people. I mean, how do you think we even got terrorism? I mean, Obama was meeting every week with the CIA. They had a front page story in the New York Times. He met every Tuesday with the CIA, the defense, and figured out where his drones should kill people. And they killed over 1,000 innocent civilians, children, grandparents. Where do you think terrorism is coming from? I mean, we're doing that. And the new Cold War, terrorism wasn't selling enough arms. So now we've got to have a war against Russia and China again to sell arms. We've got to get behind that. Part of this ban campaign, there's a terrific group called Don't Bank on the Bomb about divesting pensions and banks and, investments from nuclear weapons production. We have to be doing that. We have to help whatever we can do here. I mean, in America, there's parliamentary pledge. Eleanor Holmes Norton, who WILPF is very friendly with, they got her to put in a resolution asking us to join the treaty and to convert our military complex to energy, clean energy, windmills, not weapons, and we're getting members of Congress to sign on to that bill. There's a lot of things we can start doing in America. In New York City, we have a resolution before the City Council calling on the U.S. government to join the ban treaty, and it's already passed in Washington and Los Angeles, I think. Different cities in America and all over the world we're doing this, and we're having members of Congress sign this pledge. I went to my member of Congress, and she signed a pledge that she'll call on the government to sign the ban treaty. Not everybody wants nuclear weapons. A lot of people know they're wrong.
Yeah. So the enforcement of this treaty, does this mean that the Lawrence Livermore Lab will shut down? We hope.
Well, if we sign it, it would be, if we acknowledge the illegality of nuclear weapons, we'd have to shut down our weapons labs. But, like years ago, I worked for an organization, I was executive director of Economists Allied for Arms Reduction, and I had an economist, and we went to every one of the nuclear weapon sites. This was in the early 90s. And did a conversion plan. Like, he figured out if you shut down the lab, what kind of jobs could we have? What could people do? How could we employ people? Because a lot of people on the ground, like the coal miners and the nuclear workers, they want to keep going because they're afraid they're going to lose their work. And we have jobs. We need so many people to do windmills and solar panels and efficiency and hydro, and we need we could put so many people to work. And let me tell you something. I mean, there are really two existential threats, nuclear war and the climate catastrophe. If we don't move, they've told us we have like 10 or 12 years to reverse it where we can save ourselves.
Right.
So
exactly.
We could put everybody to work. You know, we just have to start changing. And this new treaty is like a new conversation. It's a way of saying, listen, they're illegal. Let's stop. And yes, we would have to close down the weapons lab, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
I just hope that the media will put this out and stop
Well,
talking
actually,
about
the New York Times wrote this up, which was quite a surprise. But, you know, they're also in bed with the contractors. The media is totally corrupted these days. You know, when we had 1 million people in the street of New York to stop the war in Iraq before we bombed, and Phil Donahue was the highest-rated talk show on MSNBC, and he was the only one that had us on, like Medea Benjamin, Leslie, you know, and different WILPF women, you know, the peace people. He had us on his show to talk about it. They fired him. And nobody else had us on their show. I mean, that's why it's so great that you're doing this kind of a radio program. I can't go on MSNBC or CBS or ABC, you know. I mean, forget it. Not just me, but even...
So what can people at home that are listening do now? What's one thing they can do?
Well, they should go to the website, ICAN.org, ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons.org, and sign up, and they have actions for people in different countries and places. And the other one, which I love and I think is so important, is World Beyond War. I'm doing that now. I just love that group because, you know, war is so 20th century. This is what WILPF tried to do at the turn of the century, and you were unsuccessful, you know, when we tried to, we got the Kellogg-Briand Pact, you know, that outlawed war, but nobody paid attention. You know, you can't enforce international law. You have to just change opinions and work at the local level to get your own government to support it.
That's right. Thank you for saying that. Alice, I hate to say this, but we could have gone on for another 30 minutes or more. I need to wrap this up and promote one more announcement about WILPF and our financial situation right now. So I would like to thank you. I can't say it enough for coming on the show and opening our eyes and talking about the importance of this treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the adaptation and the ratification. And I will have you on again as we see the implications of how this is going to be promulgated. So I will do that. And thank you again for telling about the importance of it. So we'll talk to you again soon.